14.3 Session Plan, Session and Program Reviews, Marc Kenneally. Client aims, program aims. The aim of the specific training is to increase power and upper body strength of the performer. It is to aid the performer in their sport by increasing these components of fitness. The performer would be increasing the components of fitness as they achieved low scores in the broad jump test and dynameter test. Both of these components of fitness are very important during the client's sport, which is football, and therefore need improving. Another aim is to increase their core, as they also had a low aerobic score. Specific session aims. The session would aim to work on their core and strength just through the Russian twists, burpees, sit-ups to increase the core, and by using press-ups, bicep curls and kettlebell swings to improve strength. The client wanted to improve their power so they can become a more effective defender in football, as it would allow them to kick the ball further, meaning that they can clear the ball from the goal more effectively. The successfulness of the session would be measured by taking their power score by testing them in standing broad jump tests. They would take part in the test before and after the training program and therefore be able to see whether their power improved. My client also wanted to work on their core and upper body strength. This would be worked on during the training session and would improve their performance as a defender in football, as they would be able to improve cardiovascular endurance as a result of core improving. They would be able to hold off the other performers more off the ball, and this would be more effective if they improved their upper body strength. We'd be able to see whether the session was successful or not, depending on whether the performer felt their upper body and core muscles being used a lot during the session, as it means they'll be used and therefore slightly improving. An assignment, a risk assessment was made. The risks are slipping on a mat. This can be controlled by making sure the participant doesn't go too much on the edge of the mat while taking part of the activity. The actions necessary is that the performer should be told to be careful around the edge of the mat, as it is possibly slippery. Running into a curtain holder on the wall. So the controls could be to don't make the performers run close to or towards the wall, or curtain holder. Make sure the curtain is tucked in completely into its holder and that it isn't loose, and make sure they know the hazard by warning them that it's there. The wet floor. Don't make the performers sprint or run fast on the slippery floor, as they could fall over. Warn the performers of the risks and warn them to watch their footing and to not sprint or change direction too quickly. Also could mop up water a bit to reduce risk of slipping on it if there is some. The coach could mark off the area that is wet. They could trip on loose weights. Make sure the weights are away from the performer when they are moving around, and move weights away from the space the performers would be running in, and tell them to watch out for the weights. They could drop the kettlebell on their feet. Make sure the performer is gripping the weights firmly, and tell the performers the risk of dropping it on their feet. Park cue was taken before the session, saying that they give consent to take part in this activity, and stating all their medical records, so depending on whether they can or can't take part in the session. They compared to the national average. They are a bit above the resting heart rate for a national average of his age. Therefore his target zones would be higher. His resting blood pressure is good, apart from his diastolic, which is slightly below average. Peak flow is below average, and his BMI is in a healthy category. So the facilities and resources, it would be in the sports hall. The facility doesn't need to be very specific, it just needs to have a suitable space about the size of a netball third, and the resources would be a 15 kg kettlebell, 8 kg dumbbell, exercise mat and a basketball. Jewelry needs to be taken off, injuries need to be mentioned, and the participant needs to be aware of weights and other equipment laying on the floor. A reasonable amount of space needs to be available for the coach, and the coach needs to be aware of spacing of the participant and equipment. This is health and safety. Emergency procedures. The first aid kit is available from an office next to the facility, and workers in the office are first aid trained. The fire exit is in the sports facility, and the meeting point in case of a fire is on the field next to the facility. And the issues arising from the risk assessment, more at risk of falling over equipment when taking part in light jog as a warm-up or in transition between drills, and they are more at risk to slipping on the mat when taking part in stretches at the end of the session. Warm-up. At the introduction of the session, I will explain that we will take part in the session and ask if they're happy to take part in the session and carry out the exercises which would be involved in the session. I'll ask if they have any injuries or if they're wearing any jewellery, in which case they could remove it. I would behave in a professional way so the performer would get the most out of the session, and I'll ask if the performer has any medical problems that may prevent them taking part in any exercises in the session. The warm-up should consist of stretches based around their arms and upper body. Examples of this would be rolling the shoulders back and forth or crossing the arms across the body while jogging. They would also take part in a light pulse raiser, which would be a light jog in a situation between some cones and back. This would prepare the muscles being used in the session and would get the performer ready for the exercises they're about to take part in. The warm-up would be fun for the performer, as it would include a mixture of new exercises and stretches that they can take part in. The upper body muscles would be warmed up, as these would be used to pick up the weights during the session. Here's a photo of the session being carried out. So the activities or drills involve 3 sets of 5 kettlebell swings with a 15 kg weight. They'll have it will take 4 minutes roughly. So this drill shouldn't take too long. So it'd have approximately 4 minutes, as the performer should only be doing 5 reps. And they get a minute break in between sets. They need to keep their knees bent and back straight when doing the drill. I will demonstrate and talk them through it, and also explain to them what to do. I'll watch them take part and make sure they're using the correct technique. This drill would work on the upper body strength. They'll take part in 2 sets of 8 bicep curls with an 8 kg weight. This drill would take around 5 minutes, as the reps are low, but there is a rest of 1.5 minutes in between the reps of the sets even. They need to keep their elbow in but not pushing into their hips, as they'll need to keep themselves upright. I'll demonstrate the drill and then talk them through it when they're doing it, and watch to make sure they're using the correct technique. This would also work on upper body strength. They'll take part in 3 sets of 10 burpees. This should take around 6 minutes with a minute rest in between sets. They should keep their elbows in close to their body when doing press-ups. I will demonstrate and carry out the drill, and they watch for their technique when they're doing it and talk them through it. This would work on core and upper body. This is the same for press-ups. They will take part in 2 sets of 15 press-ups. Again, it will take around 5 minutes with 1.5 minute rest. Work on core and upper body. And I will watch them do it after talking them through it and demonstrating. Sit-ups, they'll do 3 sets of 10 sit-ups with an 8 kg weight. So this would take around 5 minutes, as the performer would have 1.5 minute rest in between the sets. They should keep the weight above their head and not rock into the sit-up. I'll demonstrate the drill and talk them through it. Hold on to their feet as well to make sure they're firmly on the ground. This would work on their core. Russian twists, they'll take part in 2 sets of 30 seconds of Russian twist. This would take around 3 minutes as an exercise. And they'd have a minute in between the sets. They should keep their legs above the ground at all times, keep their knees bent. I'll demonstrate it and talk them through it as they are doing it. This would work on their core as well. Here's a photo of the Russian twists being explained. The cool down. The cool down should consist of stretches to go for a very light jog, gradually reducing the intensity until it reaches a slow walk. This would reduce pulse rate and mentally cool down the performer. I would ask the performer for any key points of the exercises and ask what they enjoyed about the session and what can be improved. Then I would give some positive feedback on as to how they were as a client. I would pack the equipment away by starting with the heaviest equipment and gradually getting to the lighter weights. This is avoiding injury of using heavier weights earlier by taking them away quicker. I would only lift one at a time so I don't drop the equipment and cause myself any injuries. Again, here are the aims of this and how it can be measured. The client feedback strengths were varying exercises which progressed as the session moved on. Worked at a high intensity, so I got the most out of the session. The weaknesses were although they used components of fitness like SAQ ladders to work on agility, there wasn't any sports skill specific in the session. Regarding me leading the session, I thought the strengths were I offered differentiation, remained at a high level, at their level throughout the whole training session. So if they were on the floor, I was on the floor. If they were standing up, I was standing up, and I explained every drill in detail. The areas for improvement could have come up with more stretches, and I could have made the drills even harder if they were finding the differentiation too easy. Again, here are the aims and how this could be measured. For program writing, I thought the strengths were I planned out the time usage and the warm up and cool down, as well as the actual session and main activities that would be taking part during the session. I based the exercises around what the performer needed to improve on and what would benefit them at their position in their sport. I planned the space and packing away of the equipment as well. The areas for improvement, I could make the session more sport specific and involve equipment such as football to help them with their chosen sport, as that is what they are aiming to work on, and use the components of fitness for. I could have involved agility, as there's a lot of speed change in football or any other sport related components of fitness, which is important for a defender in football, as that is his position.